Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order our building level advisory committee meeting for the Presumpscot project. It's Thursday, August 26th, 6:32 p.m. Big shout out, today is my mother's birthday. I feel like I have to do that because I mentioned that last week on a board meeting, so the 26th. I've done my duty. I gave her a call today. We were on the phone for a while.
She's watching you?
Please. I seriously doubt it. But so we don't have a quorum, so we're going to skip the approval of the minutes for last meeting. I'll put those on the agenda for next meeting. Or are we actually?
We're pretty close. I think I'm counting 6 people.
Yeah, and Councilor Ali is here as well. So actually, what would be a quorum? It's around 12. We need.
Emily, do you have the actual list? I think we have 10 community members, and then I don't remember if we have 4 school members, and then if that's the case, we're short one.
I thought it was 12 total. I could be. Well. Mm-hmm.
So I count 11, but that includes Angie Taylor. And I'm not sure if you include her in the committee.
Yes, she is one of the members. So,
okay.
So then we do have a quorum.
Okay, excellent. So I'll move for us to approve the minutes of, May 27th. Is there a second for that? You can just raise your hands and I'll that way we can document it. All right, so second by Sarah McMath. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, I don't see any. And by the way, because we are kind of informal, just unmute yourself if at any point in this you need to speak. Later on, we'll use the raise your hand feature. So any questions or comments on the minutes? I don't see any. All those in favor, please indicate and we can raise our hands. And if we don't hear any objection, we'll note it as unanimous. Thank you. Perfect. So that's unanimous. Councilor Lee, you have your hand raised. Is that your vote, or do you want to address the board, the committee?
That's my vote. I have 4 hands up.
Excellent. Wow, that's only going to be 1 vote, but thank you. Oh, Angie's here now. Perfect. Angie, hello. And from the car. Excellent. Oh, more people are trickling in. Excellent. Great.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. We just approved our minutes. We ended up having a quorum, so we went ahead with that. So now we're going to get into the actual presentation for tonight. So I'm going to hand it off to Mark and have him then take us through the rest of the meeting. All right, Mark, you have the floor.
Thank you very much.
I'll jump in real quick.
Yep, please.
First section is the project alternates. And so I just want to sort of update everyone. The agenda is really 2 parts. The first is the project alternates, and the other one is the update on the project. But the project alternates, really the purpose of this is just to sort of remind people of where we are and what's on the table for potential alternates, because we're not in a position to make any decisions about those at this time. So, we met with the DABC, the District Advisory Building Committee, last week, and sort of tabled them coming up with any form of a process for making those decisions, which is their charge, because we are in the middle of launching all of the projects with significant complications, as the Presumpscot crew knows full well. And so until we have a better understanding of what the costs associated with some of those difficulties are, we really don't know how much is available for the alternates. So our purpose today is just to very quickly remind you of the project budget and how much is available for alternates, and then just to recap for this group what the alternates are for the Presumpscot project. But we really don't need to get into like reprioritizing or doing anything along those lines at this time, because we're not in a position to actually move forward with that. So Mark's going to just walk you through the budget and the current state of alternates, and then we'll jump into the project. And as Roberto mentioned, I have to scoot out at 7. I may be back in time for the end, but it's also not clear that I will be. So, I just, if you see me disappear, that's why.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Superintendent Botana. I will share my screen now. And we will go through as Superintendent Botana suggested. We have 2 primary areas of content. One is the alternate discussion, just to kind of capture the status of kind of what went out to bid, but not to have a big discussion about it at this point. But then the next piece is also just kind of an update on where we are with progress on the project itself. And I'll try to be very mindful of looking and pausing to ensure that if you have questions that we provide plenty of opportunity to ask them and answer them. So, and then the last piece is just when our next meeting is scheduled for this group. And so,
Mark, yeah, I'm sorry, just to that end, I see a hand up. Laura, is your hand up? Do you have a question? Go for it.
I just wanted to welcome Emily Herlihy to our BLAC group. BLAC group. She's taking over for Ann Dalphin, who has moved schools. And I also wanted to congratulate Angie on a very great open house tonight.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Great. All right. So, again, just building on the preface on the conversation regarding alternates. The big picture of where we stood with the bid amounts versus what we had budgeted, going all the way back to the Lyseth school. And if we add in what the actual bid amount was for Lyseth, and then add in the actual bid for Longfellow and Reiki and the Presumpscot, and carrying the deltas of what we had budgeted for the construction only portion of it, the total of the bids was $51,400,000. So that's, of the $64 million bond, that's the amount that is just in the construction itself. And from comparing that to our budgeted amounts, leaves us with a surplus of about $500,000 after looking at the available bid funds for that. So that's kind of pretty close in terms of the overall amount. It's somewhere around that 1%, and of the total that was budgeted for construction. So that $500,000 is what we were considering as could we fund some alternates with that. But again, we're going to, because it's not a very large amount, and because we're still getting off the ground, we're going to kind of table that discussion until later. Just in terms of thinking about what the overall amounts were for the alternates, the lower table suggests, again, with the actual construction value of the alternates for the 3 different projects is. And so for Longfellow, there was about a $4.7 million alternate amount, and that was largely driven by the cafeteria and warming kitchen. That was an alternate for Longfellow that did not get awarded with the project. And then the other big part of that $4.7 million had to do with masonry upgrades, the stonework and masonry upgrades to the exterior of the building. And that was over $1 million. And so those 2 items itself accommodated a lot of the Longfellow alternate costs. Then the Reiki, there was a series of alternates that were being considered for Reiki. They tabulated to about $1.2 million. And then Presumpscot had the alternates that were being considered for Presumpscot. They just were lower in cost because the school is smaller and because there's a lot more that was being done with the additions on Presumpscot. We'll look at what those alternates are next. So I'll pause here for a moment.
Laura, is your hand still up from before, or? Oh.
Sorry, I put it down.
Thank you. All right, Mark, I think we're good.
All right, so the next slide identifies two tables. One table is what was actually included in the construction documents for the alternates. The second one is what early on in the process, the Presumpscot BLAC, when we set up the survey on what the different priorities would be, the ranking identified in that lower table is what you all folks came up with for our prioritization. And so I'm going to kind of go from the bottom table and reference back to the top table. The top table is the actual cost that contractors gave for the work. And so so the first one that was the highest rated alternate for desired alternate for the for Presumpscot was a new HVAC system. And originally it was thought, well, you know, that would be essentially ripping everything out and putting a brand new system in. Most of that actually would have been contained in fact, just about all of it in items, the other ones which were to replace the unit ventilators, which is number 2, and then the DDC controls, which we actually would have upgraded the control system when we replaced the unit ventilators anyway. So 2 and 5 were really the same as 1. So by the time we caught up with all of that, we actually had the new unit ventilators into the alternate pricing, and that's on the top table. The very first line item is to replace all the units that provide the fresh air and the heating into the classrooms, and so that's about $400,000 to go through and replace all of those units. So those would that's really contained in that first item, which is having effective, controllable ventilation system in the building. So I'm going to kind of skip number 2 because that's, as I said, that's really in the table above. We did get a price for that, and it's really that is the majority of the mechanical system in the building. The third one that was identified as a priority was to replace all the interior doors, and so we did get a price for that, and it was about $55,000. So that would, when we were done, that would mean that all of the doors on the interior of the building all were the same standard of construction and glass in them, and also the finish itself. So there would be a uniformity of all the finishes in the building. The next item was to renovate the existing hallways, and so that meant that we were put in all new ceilings and all new flooring and paint the hallways, and so that total was about just under $300,000 to do the existing building and upgrade the finishes throughout the hallways there. And so again, that's an alternate right now, and that's what the cost would be. The next item is 5, which is the DDC, which stands for Direct Digital Controls, but that's the way that you control all the heating and ventilation system. And when we would replace the unit ventilators, we would be replacing them with electronic control systems, digital controls, and so that's really part of the new unit ventilator alternate. And then the last one was tied, and that was the classroom wing nodes, we called them. They're breakout spaces in the classroom corridors. And we did actually see a price for those, and that was about $65,000 to add these in each of the classroom areas. And then the very last one was the exterior wall masonry to add insulation and do some amount of restoration of the masonry work on the exterior wall. The challenge with adding insulation to the exterior wall is that we would have to take all the casework off, and all of the unit ventilators would have to come out, and the piping has to move, and we'd have to frame in the wall and then insulate the wall and put the drywall back on the inside, and then add new casework and then reinstall the unit ventilators. By the time we looked at that and we looked at the overall scope of the project, there was sort of an aspect of how far could we extend the technical feasibility of that alternate before it became just so disruptive that it would have extended the schedule and the cost and the complexity well beyond the sort of constraints of the project. And so that one sort of was sort of not priced out at the sort of tail end of the project in preparing the construction documents. And so with that, the highest rated ones, certainly the heating and ventilation system, that was one that rose up as the most expensive item for the alternates in the total list. So I'll pause for a moment here if there are any questions.
Jennifer?
I was just wondering if these alternates are the ones that are going to be carried throughout, or can we revisit these alternates if there's ever any additional money that is available to Presumpscot, just to see if there's anything that we want to consider a little bit differently now that we will be living with COVID?
So I think, if I understand, Jennifer, I think the question is it a question of the priority, the order, or is it a question of something different that's not on this list?
I would say both, like something that's different that's not on this list and priority. I would ask both.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll start it. If Superintendent Botana, if you have also something you want to offer, certainly. But so from a pricing perspective, we have prices for the 4 items that were identified. So it's easy. You can, if there are funds available, and again, that's a conversation we're going to kind of continue on as we see how the pricing comes together for the contingencies that we have for each of the projects. But then we can certainly look at awarding any of those 4. So the order doesn't matter. And there's some conversation at our last meeting that an interest in revisiting the order should we get to the point of being able to consider these alternates. The second piece of considering something that's not on the list could be certainly done. What we would need to do, we have no idea what the price is, so we need to actually identify what that scope is for the contractor in order to have them price it. It wouldn't be a competitive price. One thing to consider with prices that were received is all the contractors that were bidding on the project, the 3 contractors, all had to price them. So there's some level of competitive pricing in the alternates that are here. But we could certainly, you could do a change order during the construction to add scope to a project. So that it's not that you couldn't.
Jennifer, do you have another question? We'll move. Okay, then Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm just wondering if someone could speak to the adequacy of the current ventilation system.
Folks, this is not the time for us to be having that conversation. That's not, I mean, we have a full agenda today about the project as it currently stands. The current ventilation system is adequate.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions?
All right, very good. So the next thing is the project update in terms of where we're at. And so the Presumpscot was the last project bid, and that was intentional, as you all remember. We did that because of the fact that the construction activity could be compressed into the shortest schedule, and so we have Great Falls Construction under contract, which is wonderful, and they are working actively with us and helping to get things geared up and going. In terms of work that's happened on site, anyone who's been to the site has seen, I think in the back, you'll see that there's been some clearing of trees, and we'll see pictures of that in a minute here. And we've also got some of the site infrastructure materials that have been delivered. So we've got some stormwater structures, the concrete structures that go underground have been delivered to the site. And so that's what's happened on the construction side, and I'll explain a little bit more about where we are with the schedule in a second here. But these are a little bit more than a week old, so just to give you kind of a sense of what was going on. You can see where we are in the backside of the site near the playground, and you can see what was a nice shade tree at one time had to make way because of its closeness to where the additions going, particularly the kindergarten wing addition, comes back in that area. And so, so that was removed, and so you can then also on the right-hand side, you can see we can see what the tree looked like before it was cut, but then on the lower side, you can also see the concrete structures that are set up on the edge of the parking area, right in front of where the modular classrooms are, and so those have been delivered to the site, and so that's kind of the activity that's occurred on site, and like I said, that's in conjunction with Great Falls and their subcontractor, the site subcontractor, getting that work done. I'll pause for a second here if there are any questions on that.
Elizabeth, is your hand up? Is that from before?
That was from before. I'll put it down. Sorry.
I think we're good, Mark.
Okay. So with respect to the permit status on this, there's two permits that we have that we're pursuing, and the first is for the portables. We're relocating the portable structures, and so from their current location, because that's where the additions are going to go. And so when there was a provision of the code that looks that if you are if you're renovating, and because we're going with a permit to move these, and they look at if you renovate more than 50% of a story, then you're required under current code to upgrade and add sprinkler systems. And so it's explicit in a for portable classroom units that are so there's a consideration, and that went into effect July 1st, and so the provision that excluded it expired, I guess, June 30th. So that is one consideration right now that we're working through with the city. The question of, do we sprinkle the existing modular units as part of the condition of moving those? That has not yet been priced in the contractor's price. So we have already gotten a price from them to add that to the portable units. Because of that consideration, we have not moved the modular classrooms. And so, again, what you'll notice if you're on site now is that they still are in their existing location, or their current location. They have not moved, and we haven't received a permit to be able to move them. So that we were unable to get that accomplished prior to the start of school, and that was the one scope item that we're hoping to get done over the summer, is the relocation of those modular classrooms. Right now, we're looking at a couple alternatives. One of the considerations is you can consider smaller classrooms or smaller structures that then wouldn't require sprinkling. We've looked at that. I think we have concluded that would be challenging because essentially you'd be trying to conduct a class in a very narrow, long shape that's under 1,000 square feet. It would be really tough. And we're also looking at if there's a way that we can find an offsite location that's being explored. So that would become our swing space instead of using the existing modular classrooms. And so the Portland Public School System, Doug and Steve, and are looking at the possibility of finding a space for that. And then another consideration we have is to actually go back to the city with a compelling argument as to why we think we wouldn't be required to sprinkle the portables. And so those avenues are all being explored. It takes time to get through a lot of those, but the reason we're doing it is to find the most efficient, economic, and timely solution to continue moving the project forward. And so all of those right now are in play. If we find an offsite location, then we certainly wouldn't need a permit to relocate the existing modular classrooms. We would essentially bypass that permit need altogether. So that's the portable permit. The portable permits were received for the new portables at Longfellow and Reiki. So Presumpscot's in a little bit different boat because we're relocating those portable units. And the other aspect is the other projects had those modular classrooms. The permits were applied for prior to the expiration of the sprinkler waiver, if you will. So that's another factor in all of this, just for greater context. And then the next piece is the permit for the project itself, which is ongoing with the city. So we've applied for the permit. They're reviewing it. One of the things that also changed with the city is that there was a stretch code. It's called. It stretches the energy code beyond what the state and requirement is, and that has to do with the energy conservation codes. It's the International Existing Energy Conservation Code. That's IECC. And the most recent published version of that is the 2021, which really starts to increase some of the requirements for efficiencies in buildings. The good news is we've identified that we're in good shape because we're going for lead with the project, but we haven't concluded the entire impact yet to the project. But we've looked very carefully at these requirements, and in many respects, we're already meeting some of the more significant aspects of the IECC 2021. Because we don't yet have the permit, and Great Falls, the contractor, is trying to get ramped up with the construction. Right now, we don't know. We're still sorting out what the impact to the overall schedule is going to be. They've been very cooperative, and we have no reason to think they won't going forward. But we don't know if there will be any impact to the overall construction schedule going forward. And so right now, that's kind of where the update is. We're trying to sort out the portable classroom, the swing space consideration, and then we're also actively working through the permitting process with the city to get our full construction permit. So I'll pause again for any questions from anyone.
Mark, do you have any? Oh, I'm sorry, Laura, you can go first.
You can go, Roberto. It's totally fine. I can wait.
Okay, I think mine are pretty quick. Thank you. Mark, do you have any preliminary idea of what the cost of sprinkling, of getting this would be for those portables? And just to have an idea of the impact.
Yeah, I think I had an estimated cost of somewhere around $50,000. I think it came in under that, the actual cost. I don't remember exactly what it is. Laura, I don't know if you remember what it is.
Yeah, I think it's 38.
Okay, 38,000. So.
Okay. And on the code, on the city stretch code changes, this is clearly, obviously, this is not something that would only apply to new construction. This applies to renovations as well.
Yeah, so I think what we're doing is looking carefully at I think there's there's part of the code that looks at what level of alteration that you're doing in a building, and then when you alter it, it's a level 3 alteration or level 4 or level, and so when you do some significant amount of alteration, that's what triggers the code. And so right now, our primary focus has been analyzing it for the new construction because we're really not altering most of the existing building.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Laura, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just was curious. I know that with this date that I believe you guys were trying to maybe see if we could get a waiver because of the circumstances. Is that completely off the table now? Is there no way we have to either find an offsite or add sprinklers or put all of the students back into the building? Are those really the only 3 options at this point?
Yeah, thank you, Laura. We are still pursuing the potential for a waiver to the requirement. So we've got some research that's been done and advice through the school department's legal counsel, and they've put together some information to look at potential waiver.
Okay, awesome. What offsite locations have been looked at?
I'll turn that over to the Portland Public Schools folks.
Good question, Laura. We spent a lovely day out on Mackworth Island looking at a building that hasn't been in use for 3 years. Mr. Lee and myself and a fellow teacher, and I'm sorry, I'm not drawing a blank on her name. We went through the building. We're making assessments as to how quickly we get it ready for the kids. Mark has done an initial assessment of the building shell. We've looked at some of the previous testing for air quality, these things that you need to have in place, fire systems, security, the entrances, landscaping. I mean, we went through it all. And there are 22 rooms in this building, beautiful lot site, playgrounds around it. It would be ideal. So we're pursuing it. And we're looking at what it would cost to pull it together. Superintendent Botana is working with their superintendent on what the timeline would look like for a lease, and putting that together on the financial end. And I've been focusing on everything from windows, roofs, how we would bring this together, cleaning, some lawn mowing, and the feasibility against these other options. So,
what would the cost for renting that space come out of our building project budget, or would that be covered by the city or school department, or how does that rental cost get covered?
That's a good question. I do not believe it would be part of the budget for Presumpscot. But the superintendent will advise me on when we get the money.
Okay, I just missed him for these questions, right?
Yeah, it would be collaborative, and I don't know what the expense would be for a monthly lease where we're collaborating with another school. The school, the Baxter School, is controlled by the state or administered to by the state. So there's certain applications and square foot costs that lease rates would be applied. We're quite working everything from both ends here. So evidently, I mean, I'm pretty confident that the superintendent has a way to pay for this if he's asking us to make it an option. I just don't have that answer for you tonight.
That's okay. My last question is just about the June 30th date. Was that something that was unaware to us when the plans for submitting the permits and the timeline for everything? I mean, was this something that was known or unknown, or I'm just curious kind of how we got here when plans were made for when our building projects were submitted to the city and everything.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. And so what when we were doing the design of all of them, we were working diligently to try to get all of them permitted as soon as we possibly could, to the point where all of the site plans had been submitted in advance of the building permit applications. And so in some ways, that's part of one of the considerations that we're asking for the city to look at is because we were under substantial review or substantive review at the time of the sort of end of the waiver for the sprinkler. Would that then mean that we wouldn't be required to sprinkle it? So that was one consideration, and that's why the other two schools, as I mentioned, didn't have the requirement for sprinkling that, because not only were we through the site permit, but we also had submitted on the building permit. Because Presumpscot, again, was just took a little longer to get through with the other two projects and submitting for the site plan review. I guess the notion of whether or not that we were going on the same assumption that all three were going to have the same set of requirements in terms of sprinkling or not sprinkling. And it was only, we submitted, I think it was a few days after. It was in the very early July that we actually submitted. So it was not missed much, but it was after that June 30th date. And so I guess the short answer is we're going with the assumption that all of them were going to be the same set of circumstances for permitting, and the timing worked out so that by the time we got the actual building permit in for Presumpscot, it was after that date. So there was some consideration that the waiver from the state was going to extend longer, but that didn't happen. It sunsetted.
Okay, I'm sorry, I know I said that was my last question, but can I ask one more follow-up question then? Looking at these different options, is the offsite, if we're going to bet money on one thing happening over another, is the offsite location looking better than the cost for the sprinkler system and or getting a waiver for the having to add a sprinkler system?
I think if we look at the timelines as they approach each other, the better solution would be to be on Mackworth Island for the kids. They wouldn't be behind the construction site. So there's more variables than just the timeline matching up to be a little bit different in cost. And the main thrust is why I talked about how can we get into Mackworth. It's a school. It has to be recertified as a school. All of this inspection components, all of these things must be in place. And as someone said earlier, we're in COVID. So compacting all those, looking at the modulars at a smaller size and the restrictive nature of the smaller size, and this cost at $38,000 for the sprinkler is going to boil down to this: what gets the contractor moving to start digging that foundation for your new addition where those modulars are gone? Okay, so whether we're moving them to put you in them with a sprinkler, we'll see what that looks like. If that's going to meet it and get them going and that's available to us, we'll do it. If it's I can get Mackworth together, we drop the ball on the modulars, they start digging the foundation, and we go. And as I was talking to Principal Angie the other day, and I was borrowing myself and working with Mark into these issues of structure and the safety and the pandemic, and all of these things seem to be adding to the timeline to Mackworth. But after talking with Angie, she quite rightly reminded me is they have windows and heat now in Presumpscot. So we're really pursuing it on the idea, if these numbers are colliding, it's not the numbers. What can I do to get the contractor starting the addition? So we're pushing on all ends of that. So
if something with moving to Mackworth, like if the air quality tests come back bad, or is there a backup plan for an offsite location?
Well, I'm not assessing it that way. They have an air quality assessment been done on the building very recently, within the time that the last occupants were there, and I've seen that. We've retest. From my assessment walking through it with Mark, I didn't, you can kind of tell if you're in a musty old building and everything. I didn't see any water damages, so I don't think we have an issue there. What I'm saying is that it has heat and windows.
That Mackworth has heat and windows.
Yeah, it has. It's like your modulars at Presumpscot. It has heat, it has windows, has no univentilators, no RTUs on the roof except for an exhaust fan. I believe that we can test that air, run that system, open windows, use portables, portable air condition, HEPA filters like we've been doing through this pandemic, and air that building out. The roof doesn't leak. We might, if we can get a fast start that everybody can say is safe and clean that building up, it could be a fast move for the building. Now, I'm not really sure how the administrations, ours and theirs, are structuring the lease. Harvey is working on that. Doug's helping to work on that. So the number side is coming together with Mark's assessment and our actually being there and shaking this out against what the timeline we need to get going with some of these answers from, can we move and not put a sprinkler, or move it with a sprinkler? And in my mind, and I think Angie's is the same, and I think Javier as well, is we feel that if we can pull Mackworth off, it would be a long-term better environment for the kids.
Well, I think it's a fair, better environment than squishing classrooms into the gymnasium. So I agree with you, Steve. I just, you know, as a parent of a second grader who this will greatly impact, I just was looking for some more details than maybe what we had at this point. So thank you for answering all my questions. I'll mute myself at this point.
And Mark and I are working on it since we went there, and tomorrow we'll have another conversation. So we'll have answers to you as soon as we can make that clutch point to go, because we need to start. We need those modulars gone one way or the other to start your addition.
Great. Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Laura. Angie, your hand was up intermittently. Do you want to chime in?
I was just going to add two things. One, there is a cost savings that we'll get if we don't move the mod. So that's one part that I think is important to the cost. And secondly, I just want to add that the teachers are ready to go to Mackworth. They're so excited. So anything we can do to make this happen, I think it is absolutely the best decision in this to get our construction project going. And the kids are going to be outdoors on the ocean for a year. It'll be amazing.
Thank you, Angie, for that. We really appreciate the input from your perspective. That's really helpful. Any other questions or comments? And I guess just to underscore, for the start of the school, the existing portables are going to be used. So next week.
Correct.
All right, Mark. I think you can carry on.
All right. Well, that kind of wraps up kind of where we are with progress. That's good conversation. And again, I think we'll know a lot more by our next meeting, which is in 1 month's time here after we get things underway with the school year. So right now we're scheduled for September 23rd is our next BLAC meeting, and Presumpscot is first that night. So we're at the 5:30 time slot. So in our rotation. So it'll be a little earlier evening to run through. And again, I think at that point we'll have a lot more known about some of the questions that folks have had tonight, and be able to get everyone up to speed. So I know we're working really hard to make sure that we get this project started and underway, and not only this one, but in concert with the other two projects, and also the completion of the LICEF project, which is almost kind of had an official completion today, if you will, that the LICEF project got its certificate of occupancy, which allows it to have all the students come back in, staff move back in, and so they made it through, and we will too. And so with that, Roberto, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And on that note, big shout out to your team and to Steven and Stephen and everyone. I mean, that a lot takes a lot of work and collaboration to make that happen, and great timing today to be able to announce it.
Thank you, Roberto. I'll tell you, it was a very happy day for me and Doug and all of our staff, and to see the kids in that school. And yeah, it's been a long time coming, this pandemic and everything, but it makes me really happy to see.
I remember in 2017 when I came in as chair of the operations committee, and you just came into the district, you were starting to dive into this. So I can appreciate how you feel today, closing on one of the 4 buildings. So shout out to you, big time. I did have one question because I went back on the slideshow and I meant to ask it earlier. On that tree that was removed, are we planting a replacement? What are we doing? Because that was a massive tree and tons of shade that we were getting from it. So what's our plan in that sphere?
Yeah, thank you, Roberto. We do have some trees. It certainly won't be the same size. It'll be a much smaller caliper, but in time it'll grow and provide a wonderful place for climbing and shade and everything else that these great trees provide. So the site plan, the landscape plan does include trees.
All right, thank you. I know that there the Reiki also had a pretty significant tree removal as well. I just want to make sure that we're replacing this. The city is being deforested rather quickly, so gotta be aware.
Yeah, the city has been very, very watchful of everything we're doing with the trees, and so absolutely, you've got a lot of advocacy at the city administration regarding keeping as many trees as we possibly can and making sure that we restore where possible.
Certainly.
We've been working really very closely with the city arborist, Jeff Tarling, and he's been great. The city's been great. He has a wonderful plan for grow back, and yeah.
I remember actually during the row construction, because also another massive tree. Anyways,
it's sad.
Do we have any other questions or comments for tonight?
I just want to thank you, everybody, for all your hard work. I really appreciate it.
Great. So, having said that, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Nobody wants to leave.
No one wants to leave. This is cool. You guys want to stick around for the third one? All right, we'll move. We'll say Elizabeth moved. I'll second. All those in favor, please indicate. And if we don't hear objection, we'll note it as unanimous. Excellent. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. I'll see you guys next month. And yeah, have a great night. Good to see you, Councilor Early.